I am getting from it, of how I am pleasing. Surely you want to please God. Surely you want to do the right things. But to get away from the thought that I am doing it, and into the thought that He is doing it through me, that I am doing it in Him, and we are doing it together, dissolving bit by bit anything that relates to the thought of separateness, the thought of ego, and the thought of competition. This is not an easy thing to get out of. The ego is a very subtle instrument, and that's all it is an instrument for the soul to be able to function in the body. The ego is the soul identified with the body. We want to break that identification and bring ourselves to the realization that we are that which is in all bodies. It isn't as if it were a limitation. It isn't as if we were depriving ourselves. It's rather as if we were expanding our consciousness from the little to the infinite. And it isn't easy because it doesn't come by the normal ways of thinking. It isn't, as it says in the Bible, my ways are not thy ways, saith the Lord. And this is true on so many, many levels. We think of getting rid of the ego, for example, by suppressing the ego. But it takes just as much energy and just as much ego, if not more, to suppress the ego. People who say, no, I mustn't accept this job or that job because it might feed my ego. This may be a true thought. On the other hand, it might be going against something in your nature which needs to be expressed so that it can expand outward. How are you to know? The answer to that is that if you do everything not only for God, but with God, and offer everything that you do up to Him, or offer the fruits of what you do up to Him. Master said that we must act. We can't get there by not acting. The Bhagavad Gita makes a very strong point of the teaching that no man can get out of the ego, or out of action, I should say, by not acting. Because you have the impulse to act, and by just refusing to act, all you're doing is putting out another kind of action, an impeding kind of action, which is actually more limiting. The way out of action is not to refrain from action, but always to feel that you are inspired by God's power, that you are using God's power. As Yogananda put it, I will reason, I will, I will act, but guide thou my reason, will, and activity to the right path in everything. Again, he spoke about healing and about manifesting one's prayers, getting answers to prayers and so on. He always emphasized a very delicate line between you doing it and just letting God do it. Neither way works. If you just let God do it passively, I've often mentioned the time when, because we had been taught to speak from inspiration, and I thought, well, maybe the best way to do that, if I'm going to feel that God is the doer and that His is the inspiration and so on, maybe I shouldn't try to talk at all and just let Him use me. And I remember this time, this was many years ago in Hollywood Church, in the middle of a sermon, I stopped talking and just stood there and waited for God to continue. And I waited a good 2 minutes. That's a long time for somebody who's standing there with everybody waiting for him to say something, not to say anything. And some people were just perspiring with nervousness for me. But I was perfectly calm. I was just waiting to see what he would say. And I found that he didn't say anything. It's only when we act to the best of our ability and draw on Him, ask Him to do it through us, that we draw His power. That's why Yogananda said, my own but God-given power. It isn't, on the other hand, the opposite thought is that which says, I'm doing it all. And a lot of New Thought people do this. They think in terms of manifesting Well, it's usually a parking place for some reason, but whatever it is, I don't know why they insist on parking places, but um, they think always that if I have the right positive thoughts, I will make it happen. I. And first of all, you end up with nothing but a parking place. And what's so big about that? You usually end up with small things. Or you end up getting what you worked for, and it was even not good for you, because it wasn't in the flow. The ego can make a lot of things happen, but somehow in the end it doesn't happen right. It's always just a little bit short of what you wanted, or it suddenly blows up in your face, or it feeds that which ultimately gives you, leads you into bondage. Because if you are left with the thought that I did that, I made that parking place happen, then you end up thinking that maybe I can make 2 parking places happen. And you go on into greater and greater glories, where you forget that there is sweetness and also truth in letting God into the picture. The ego doesn't like that. The ego doesn't even like to meditate. The ego wants to claim credit for everything. And when the soul says, "Well, why do you take credit for it, for what you've done?" The ego says, "Listen, bud, I worked hard for this." And but if you can really just say, "No, God really is the doer," and give it to Him, suddenly you find that there's an extraordinary freedom and happiness in that relinquishment, in offering it up into a larger self. Not with a hangdog expression of, gee, I can't do anything, he won't let me do anything, he's got to do it all. Not like that. But you're a part of something much bigger that's going on. There's always a certain joy in knowing that you're a part of something much bigger than just your little self. It's because the soul wants to be a part of the universe. And indeed, if you can just give the credit for everything that you do, give the fruits of everything that you do to Him, and say, "You are the doer," but then don't wait passively. Say, "We are the doer," if you like, but yours is the power, yours is the glory, mine is just the sweat. Sounds pretty grim when I put it that way, doesn't it? But in fact, you love it in the end. You find out that it isn't like that. It's that there is a sense of freedom and a sense of accomplishment and a sense of, okay, so I did it, but that's not me. You see, usually, whatever we do, we bind ourselves by. Look at Macbeth. It's a very good example, because he started out not such a bad person, but by his crimes, he became worse and worse until he became a terrible person. By the crimes, or by the good deeds, or by anything that you do, you gradually limit yourself and box yourself into a corner where you are just that. It would be very nice to be able to do that and not be bound by it. To say, all right, it was done through me, but I'm not that. Why go to your grave thinking of yourself as a banger? Why go to your grave thinking of yourself as anything? You can be everything. Why be limited to being one thing? God wants us to become the universe. God wants us to become His child, and to know that we are in everything and a part of everything. And so if whatever you do with great enthusiasm, great joy for Him, but without the thought that it limits you in any way, then you have, in fact, not the sweat as it looks like in the beginning, but the glory, the freedom, everything. And so you find, too, that you can do a great deal more. I used to have this thought that you all know that I've written a lot of music and done a lot with music, but when I was working on it in the early years, and the songs that you heard earlier were mostly those songs, I used to feel sort of a little bit embarrassed, because I'd meet other musicians and they were so into being musicians, and I didn't feel like a musician. I thought, well, I'm just not a very good one. That's why I feel that way. I don't know much about music, and so I would always defer to them. because they took it so seriously, and to me it was just sort of fun. If I had a free few minutes, I'd sit down and write a song, because it was fun to do. And I thought that meant that I wasn't being sincere. I didn't mean I was being insincere, but not as dedicated as they, and therefore I couldn't define myself in terms of being a composer or a singer or anything like that. But I came to realize that, in fact, I could do a lot better for not being that involved. I was perfectly sincere. I was committed too, but I was committed to something else. I wasn't committed to thinking that a song was the be-all and end-all of anything. And so that when it was done, I'd just sort of forget it and go on and do something else. And if I never wrote another song, fine. But what I realized is that any other attitude would be sort of a fanaticism, a boxing yourself in where this is your whole reality and other realities don't exist. Concentration is one thing, but you can concentrate a lot better if you don't so totally involve yourself in a mere thing that you lose your sense of proportion. And that's what people tend to do. I've mentioned to those of you who live here, and I don't suppose the new people have heard it, but just a simple little episode that happened to me many years ago. I met some man who was a very pompous sort of businessman, stockbroker type, very self-important. He lived in San Francisco, and the Wall Street of San Francisco is Montgomery Street, and he wanted me to know where he was, and he said, "I work on Montgomery Street." And I didn't gasp, and so he went on to say, "Of course, you know what that means." Yes, I knew what it meant. Why should a person, if he's going to enjoy being a stockbroker, not enjoy being a stockbroker? Why does he have to take it so damn seriously? But people do. They get so grim about whatever they're doing, and you see them going to work like this. And actually, God set us into this world to enjoy His joy, to live in His joy. And you can retain your innocence. You can retain the people who are best at things are always those people who are the least absolutely involved personally. They can take it or leave it alone. They concentrate totally, but there's something else behind that. Very often you'll find that they are childlike. I remember a very sweet little episode that happened to me years ago. I was on a train in Switzerland, and sitting with me was a rich rancher from Texas. And he was talking with his Texas accent, and he was the sort of you'd expect. It wasn't like that at all, but I expected too, that he would be the typical, the Texan attitude is so often one of bigness. All Texan jokes have to do with their sense of bigness, like this man who a couple of men went into a Rolls-Royce dealership, and they saw a Rolls-Royce back in the days when Rolls-Royces cost only $32,000, and one of them whips out his check to buy it, and the other one says, "No, you don't. You got the lunch, remember?" And or the other one who had his windshield prescription ground so he didn't have to wear glasses. And he was sort of like this, it seemed. And I was so pleased and touched when I heard him say, I just feel like a kid over here with all this culture and all these wonderful works of art, and I just it's marvelous. And it was so sweet to hear this man talking just the way I didn't expect. That if we can really have that kind of childlike attitude, and many really successful people that I've met are like that by nature. I remember a very famous conductor whom I gave Kriya initiation to, and so he gave me, this was in Sydney, Australia, and he gave me a ticket to his concert that night, the symphony concert, and Afterwards, I went back to thank him and greet him, and as soon as he saw me, he said, "Oh, come here, come here," and he took me into a separate room, and he was saying, "I was meditating, and I saw this beautiful light. Is that right?" And but it's so nice to see that such people don't necessarily become absolute slaves of their success, absolute slaves of their particular power. It's once they start to become slaves, they lose that power. All real power comes from our greater self, from the divine. And if we want to deepen our relationship with him, we have to be willing to give up this little self in favor of the bigger self. We can't do it by not acting. We can't do it by refusing to express our talents and our abilities. What we have to do is act, but offer our action, offer the fruits of our action always up to him. There is a festival that all of you have heard about. It's especially virulent, this disease, down in Rio on Mardi Gras. And we've all probably seen movies, if we haven't actually been there, of Mardi Gras in Rio. And what you see is a lot of people bouncing up and down and shouting and singing, la 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 la, and they get into a kind of hysteria. Now just imagine catching somebody at the peak of this hysteria and saying to him that your wife just left you. Do you think he'd listen? I doubt it very much. Oh yeah! Now just imagine saying, your wife just left you. Oh, wait a minute, is that so? And he'd suddenly stop all that noise and he'd listen, wouldn't he? Probably, unless he was too drunk. And any time that you really want to listen, you find that automatically you stop this mental hysteria, which comes in many shapes and sizes. The giant economy size may be in Rio on Mardi Gras, but you'll find it in all kinds of ways where you put up so much noise that you're not really listening to anyone else. Somebody called me on the phone the other day, and every time I tried to say anything, this person kept talking and talking and talking. And how can you listen to God if you talk all the time? How can you listen to him? There are many ways of being in a kind of hysteria. Dogmatism is a kind of hysteria. You're so absolutely determined that God shall be exactly what you think he is, that you won't allow him to be anything else. And yes, God, I believe in you, and I know that you're a man with a blue skin, and you play a flute, or whatever it is. So God just sort of humbly retires and say, all right, if you want that kind of God, go to it, but I will be quiet. Dogmatism, restless mind, desires, ambitions, all the waves that we put up with our minds, these are a kind of hysteria, not as intense as a Mardi Gras kind of hysteria, but again, they prevent us from really listening. And if you want to deepen your spiritual life, you must go beyond certainly what is a need in the beginning is to make enough noise to sort of silence your other side. You have to pray, chant intensely, and so on to get the other tendencies to sort of come around with you. But then you've got to go beyond that, and you have, in fact, to deepen your life, your inner life. You have to, it all comes down to listening. We have to increase our receptivity. And all of this comes down to becoming more centered, more peaceful, more inward, more calm. You can practice it all the time. Not saying, for example, what do I want? Don't be that interested in opinions, yours or anyone else's. Truth, fact, reality, this is what matters. And the only way you can find that out is to try to listen, to attune yourself. It doesn't matter what you want. What matters is what is. And if what you want happens to be in tune with what is, fine, it'll happen. But in the end, the only thing that finally wins is truth. And so what we've got to do is stop making a noise and just start to listen. Attune ourselves to reality. And that means, again, listening to other people. Listen to what they have to say. When you have a job to do, don't think in terms of what do you want, but what is trying to happen? What wants to happen here? I've seen over the years here at Ananda that the people who have been able to really make Ananda happen have always been the people, not those who thought in terms of what they wanted Ananda to be, but thought in terms rather of what was Ananda trying to be. What was God trying to accomplish through Ananda? What was happening here? The more you listen, and on the basis of listening, act, and even while acting, still listen, the more you will find that you become deepened, and there is a certain inner intuition that begins to flow. There are lots of things that we could say that tie in with this. For example, after you've practiced the techniques of meditation, the way to develop that intuition that comes from inwardness and from an attunement with that flow, the way to develop it is to sit for a long time after the practice of the techniques, just enjoying the peaceful after effects of meditation and trying to deepen those. You want to enjoy this peace. It's not enough merely to feel it and then get up and dust your hands off and go into battle again, but prolong the enjoyment of the peaceful after effects of meditation and of the techniques of meditation. When you come out of meditation, keep that thought of peace, that enjoyment of peace with you as long as possible. You'll find that in that way, bit by bit, there comes a certain knowledge of what to do, a certain understanding of situations. Always listen first. When people come to you with problems, listen not only to what they're saying, but listen to what is trying to be said through them. Emerson put it very well in his essay on the Oversoul. He said, men descend to meet. That while two people are talking, Jove smiles at Jove from behind these two. That the soul is sort of greeting the soul. And if we would give that soul a chance to talk, or if when people are talking to you, try to listen not just to their words. The words very often, even without their wanting to, disguise what they're trying to say. It may be because they aren't able to express themselves clearly. It may be that they don't really yet know what it is that they're trying to say. But the soul, listen to what the soul is saying through them. Listen to what is trying to happen again. And you will find that the best kind of advice you can give people is not what you have lived through and what you have learned. It might be that too. But it might well be that the best kind of advice is that which they are trying to give to themselves, but haven't got the clarity yet to understand it. In other words, what their soul is trying to convey to their ego. And because of your non-involvement in the problem, because you're a little bit detached from it, therefore you can perhaps hear more clearly. But in everything that you do, if you will step back and listen. So one of the ways to develop, to deepen your spiritual life, and a very important way, is to learn to listen. To learn to extend, to prolong the enjoyment of the peaceful after effects of meditation, after effects of the techniques, to sit as long as you can in meditation without techniques, just trying to sink into that peace, and then to carry that through so that when you listen, you're listening on that level, and not, because I can easily imagine somebody listening in this way, oh yeah, hey, tell me more, and like that. That's on an ego level. I mean, listen with the soul. Listen the way you'd listen in meditation. Listen to that higher self that's talking in silence. Another way to deepen your inner life is always to try to live at your center. Don't let things take you out of that center. If anything threatens to do it, then know that you wouldn't handle it right anyway, and so back off a little bit. Always try to act from here, not from out here. You'll find that everything that you do will proceed better. I would say this, that if ever you meet somebody who's very magnetic in any way, it's because he has to some extent found his center. that anybody who is strong enough to be able to convince other people, and I'm talking in a general way now, because there are some people who are strong enough to convince or sway other people or make things happen who are themselves not good people, even evil people. And yet you will see that, for instance, a Hitler or a Mussolini or somebody, you will find that at least they always have this quality in common, that they're centered in themselves. People listen to those who are centered in themselves. And events are shaped by people who are centered in themselves. What you want to do is center yourself in your higher self so that you will be guided by goodness and truth. But centeredness, added to these other qualities, is a very important aspect of deepening your spiritual life. Everything that you do should begin at this center. You will find that the more you do that, the more you will really have control over your life. And the interesting thing is that then things will be drawn to you that will be beneficial to you. The more you allow yourself to be spun out of your own center by life circumstances, the less control you will have, not only over what you do, but oddly enough, because your magnetism then will become centered in things or people or whatever, the more you will find that you don't even attract to yourself the things that are best for you anymore. Learn to become centered in the spine. When you meditate, try to feel that center there. And chanting Om at the chakras is a good thing. The different techniques of yoga and Zen and so on that get you centered are all good. But then offer that energy upward from all of these chakras. It would help you. Another thing that would help you would be to think of the heart as being, this is the way it's described in the Srimad Bhagavatam, as a lotus with the petals turned downward. Turn the petals upward toward the brain. When you feel devotion in the heart, offer that devotion, that feeling, up to the point between the eyebrows. If, for example, in chanting and meditating, you feel so much love that you can't help crying with love and with joy, it's beautiful, and such tears wash away many sins. And yet you do find a point that if you don't internalize it and become calm and centered and offer it up, you become exhausted by it and you lose the feeling of love. It's got to be turned toward calmness. It's all right at first, but then take it within. Otherwise you'll lose it. Take it within, become calm, not by suppression and control so much as by offering that energy calmly up to the point between the eyebrows. You'll see then that it will grow, that the love will be a great deal deeper, and that it's something that you won't get tired of. It won't tire you. It will be a much deeper love. Then another important point is to always listen. Not just listen while you're meditating. Always try to be in the listening presence. Don't fill your life up with too many distractions. It's so easy to do, but once it's all over, where is it? You know, the average, I forget what it is, but I think it's that the average person in this country, over a lifetime, watches 1.5 years of ads on TV. This is hard to believe. The amount of time that we waste watching TV is bad enough, but how much of that's taken up just with the ads? I remember 3 years ago in Hawaii, I was in a rented house or cabin, and there was a TV there, and so I turned the TV on, and there was a movie. So I watched it for about 5 minutes, and then ads came on, and I watched about 9 ads, and then voice said, "Monday night at the movies will return after the following announcements." I turned it off, and I just have lost interest in TV ever since. It's just, it's an insult to your intelligence. But it's more than that. We waste so much time, and then suddenly we wake up and we think, what have I done with my life? Because your life is measured to a very large degree by the little things that you do. The big crises, the big acts. It's strange how many movies there are about World War II. I lived through it in a way. I didn't get involved in it. I wasn't in the army. But still, I was alive at that time and aware of the intensity, to some extent, of the struggle and pain and tragedy and so on. Nobody enjoyed living through. Nobody wanted anything to do with it. They wanted peace. They didn't want to be shooting each other and having their legs and arms blown off. Why do they want to see movies about it now? It's because, at least for that little bit of time, people were putting out energy and living intensely. They were living dangerously, and they call that intensely. It may not have been all that intense, but there was the longing for it, the nostalgia for that period when really we were on the edge of our seats. And why? Because mostly people are sitting back in lazy boys. We can't live in crisis all the time, and yet to live intensely need not be so exhausting as it may seem. If you live intensely without being tense, if you live much more consciously, in other words. But we don't have an opportunity very often, and I hope it won't come again, although I can't help thinking that it will, to go through warfare and to have real crises that we have to face and tragedies that we have to deal with and so on. Most of the time our lives are not set for heroism. And so we sit back and read Newsweek. And it's okay a little bit, but the trouble is that a day goes by, and how much have you done of anything else? And another day goes by, and how much have you done of anything else? And a year goes by, and what did you really accomplish? And you think, well, life is long, but you wake up at the age of 70 and realize that it wasn't long at all. A friend of mine was talking about his mother, who, at the age of 85, couldn't remember what happened yesterday, but could remember clearly all the little things that happened when she was 20. As if all those years just hadn't quite existed. Another interesting fact was Joseph Conrad. He was born Polish and became English and learned English absolutely perfectly, and of course was a great writer. And in his old age, he developed a thick Polish accent. Strange. But really, the difference between one part of one's life and the first part of one's life and the last part of one's life is not all that great. A friend of my mother's, who was probably 78, said that people look at me and they see me as an old woman, but when they say it, when I see them thinking that way, I just laugh, because I know I'm just that same little girl. And that's the consciousness inwardly doesn't really change all that much. She always had the consciousness of a little girl, which is why she would put it that way. But the fact all the same is that life is extraordinarily short, and we should not waste our time. We should put our time into things that are really worthwhile. Don't think that you can sort of drown. You see, just like Mardi Gras, the fillers, the distractions, all the little things we do to escape the responsibility for listening to the divine voice within ourselves, these are, like Mardi Gras, a kind of hysteria, a kind of madness, a kind of inebriation. We think to make enough noise to push out of our minds, and therefore out of reality, that silent universe that is just sitting there watching, waiting for us to wake up and take notice. I used to notice this when I was in college, and I'd go to a college party, and I was longing for something more, and I'd go outside. I remember there was a beach party one night, and we were all there cooking hot dogs and singing, and it all seemed sort of, I don't know, it just... I remember taking a walk down the beach by myself, and getting away from all the noise and laughter and jokes and everything, and suddenly seeing the stars and hearing the ocean come up on the beach and feeling that this ocean is touching many other beaches, many other shores, many other lives. And we're united by this ocean. And there's something that we all share. There's something silent going on underneath all this noise and partying that if we could hear, if we could attune ourselves to, would make our lives worthwhile. But we're afraid of that emptiness. I mean, supposing you are met by a stranger. You're sitting in a restaurant by yourself at the table, and somebody plunks himself down in front of you and sits there and stares at you. And you start eating, and he still just sits there and stares at you. And pretty soon you start to get uneasy. And before very long you begin to think he must have some very harmful or negative or threatening kind of thought in his mind. Otherwise, why would he sit there and stare at you? And so you develop this fear, and you try to do something to escape him. And at the same time, maybe what he's really thinking is that he's a lawyer who has a legacy for somebody, and he thinks it might be you, and he's trying to really figure out if you're the real one. He might be a friend who has something that he wants to say to you that'll be helpful. Why do you have to come up with a negative thought just because he's silent? People are threatened by this silent universe because they think it's so silent it must be terrible, it must be terrifying. And so the silent universe makes them party, makes them make a lot of noise. They try to crowd out life's realities and pretend that they aren't there. I was at a party once years ago and talking with somebody, and somebody came over and said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Philosophy." "Philosophy!" Like this. And he was wanting to sort of make a big noise. And of course you can't have fun and be a philosopher. Why not? If your philosophy is joy, why do you have to be grim about it? Why does philosophy have to be threatening? Why does truth have to be threatening? Why does being internalized and deepened and all these things, why does it have to be threatening? Because people are afraid of silence, because they always seem to assume the worst. But just stop and think that it's there anyway, and it'll just keep on sitting there staring at you. Why don't you try to find out what it's trying to say? Listen for a change. Don't get uneasy just because it's being quiet. You will find that nothing that ever comes to you that really is beneficial will come if you make too much noise. Many wonderful opportunities will escape you just because you're making too much noise to listen. Many great truths will pass over you, many great opportunities. Sometimes the Christ consciousness will come to you, but it won't be able to settle on you because you're making too much noise, or because you've gone to sleep, one or the other. But that's the parable of the wise and foolish virgins in the Bible, where the foolish virgins decided the bridegroom wasn't going to come after all, and so they went to sleep. And the bridegroom, which is the Christ consciousness, came in the middle of the night and saw them sleeping, and saw a few wise virgins still waiting, and they were the ones that he took. And so the Christ consciousness comes sometimes to us, but if we don't listen, "Oh, I know, I've had these experiences. This is human. It isn't accusatory. We're all like that." I remember one time I'd been on the path only a few months, and I was sitting there and meditating before lunch. And all of a sudden I felt this enormous joy come over me. It was so beautiful, and yet so perfectly normal. Sort of your response to that joy is, "But of course, this is what I am. How could I ever be anything else?" And you think, "Well, I've got it now. It can never leave me." And I looked at my watch, and it was time for lunch. And I went off and had lunch. And I lost it. And it was a long time before it came back. When it comes, don't let anything else get in your way. If in your practice of the technique suddenly you feel the presence of God, forget those techniques. Just go with that presence. If you have some high experience in the middle of Kriya, forget your Kriya. That's what you're doing Kriya for. Forget your Kriya and just enjoy. Whenever you feel some great inspiration, try to live with that inspiration. Don't say, "Well, thanks, but I'm busy now." Those are the times that don't come often enough. It's sort of like when you start out driving from Los Angeles eastward, and I don't know if it's still there, but it was years ago, just outside of Banning, a big sign for a New York hotel. Well, you've got to go a long way before you see another sign for a New York hotel. But the closer you get to New York, the more signs you see, until finally you wish they'd just let you see the countryside. And so it is with these spiritual experiences. In the beginning they'll come, but they won't be that often. And they'll say the way lies this way. They'll say it in different ways. They may say it in letters of light. They may say it in inspirations of joy or love. But when you see them, don't think that from now on you're going to be seeing nothing but those. Go deep with them while you have them. Grab them while they last. And you'll find that then they will go deeper and they will be more frequent. And then, if you don't allow distractions to pile up too often, and don't allow another great obstacle to spiritual growth is indifference. Always live in the thought of devotion. Don't allow yourself to become indifferent. Mix with devotees and take the best of what you can get from those devotees. Indifference to spiritual realities is one of the great obstacles on the path. Another obstacle is doubt. And how do you handle doubt? You don't handle it by sweeping it under the carpet necessarily, but you can handle it above all by love. That after all, however God chose to make his universe is really his business. People's doubts are so extraordinary. They're so rarely on the right subject, but they can be, all of them, cured by love. If you will just love God deeply enough, you will find that that's the answer. But also, there are constructive doubts as well as destructive doubts. Destructive doubts are, you must always look for a wholesome answer to them. For example, there were some devotees, disciples of Yogananda, who were feeling very discouraged about their spiritual progress. And his answer to them was, what's the difference? You have to live anyway. Why not live in the right way? Instead of thinking, when you have a nail in a board, you don't know how much of the nail is in the board. All you know is that if you keep tugging, sooner or later the nail will come out. And so why waste your energy thinking, gosh, I don't know how long I'm going to have to do this. If it's really important that you get the nail out, then do that which is needed to get the nail out. If it's really important to, if you really know that you aren't finding happiness on your own, that God, if you're sure that God is the answer, if you're sure that living in a higher way is better than living in a lower way, get it back to the basics and don't worry about all the trivial things that people worry about. They can get caught in so many little vortices of confusion. But always say, for example, in this case, where I am on the path, what I'm getting out of the path, that's not my business. Action without desire for the fruits of action. Instead of being negative, say, I have to live anyway, I will live in the right way. An example of it is somebody who came to Yogananda when he was a young man and said to him that someday you and all your fellow devotees will be very disillusioned and bitter when you wake up and find that there is no God. And Yogananda said, well, you may be right. Maybe there is no God, but at least I will have the satisfaction of knowing that I've done some good. Don't worry about all those things. Even the existence of God is secondary to the fact that if you live in the right way, you feel good, and if you live in the wrong way, you feel badly. Sister Gyanamata was always very much in tune with the Guru, and one of the disciples, sort of a negative, doubting type of disciple, said, "Why do you always do his will? Why don't you do your will? You've got to emphasize yourself. You've got to express yourself." And she said, "Well, I'll leave that to you to do. But I must say, I have never been so happy in my life as I have been since living here and being in tune with my guru. And he wasn't ordering her around. She wasn't sacrificing anything. She was just giving up her ego toward a much higher flow, where this other disciple remained grumbling and complaining. If you think that you're going to get anywhere spiritually by expressing yourself, you've got it all together backwards. It just isn't going to work. What we want to do is express the higher self, okay? Express the soul. Express that divine impulse. Express God. But to say, I am an artist, I must paint, and so on, this is all ego. You won't get there that way. Give it up into Him. If you want to deepen your spiritual life, then let Him be the doer. And it doesn't really matter what you do outwardly. To be willing to give up. There was one saint who said, I will do anything for any man, so long as it doesn't go against my own conscience, just for the sake of strengthening my willpower at the expense of my desires. That was very wise. To be able to have the strength. If somebody comes and tells you to do something, you don't want to be bossed by people, you don't want to be a slave, you don't want to weaken your willpower. Okay, granted all of those things. But if you can gain enough of a center in yourself to where you can realize that, no, I'm not doing it because he told me, I'm doing it because I wish to. I'm doing it because I think that it's very good for me to control my own ego in order to achieve freedom. And if you do it from that consciousness rather than, yes, Master, like this, and you just sort of follow in an automatic and blind way. But if you do it with this sense of centeredness, and no, I choose to do that which is asked of me, this kind of obedience is very wholesome. And it's only when it's taken to the extent of you're being obligated to obey. Obedience should be something free. Obedience should be your own free gift, rather than attached to all sorts of guilt feelings and so on. But if you can act with a sense of cooperation with others, that's why Jesus said that if somebody makes you go a mile, go 2 miles. In other words, do him one better, so that you're proving to yourself also that you're not just doing it because he made you do it, but you're giving up your ego at the same time, to be able to go along with other people, to be able to go along. I remember there was this one woman who used to phone me when I was living at my parents' house, and she always managed, she had a certain gift of intuition, I think, that she always managed to call just as I was sitting down to my dinner. And she always asked advice which she never wanted. She would always end up sort of telling me the kind of advice that I was supposed to give her before she would accept it. And I remember my mother one time saying to me that you mustn't let her impose on you. And I said, well, she has a perfect right to, and then I sort of finished lamely, impose on me. But in fact, I felt that I was doing the right thing by giving up my own desire. My own desire was to eat and not be bothered by this woman who couldn't be helped anyway. She wanted to be her own guru with a vengeance. And I knew I couldn't help her, but I felt that I was helping myself spiritually by not reacting on an ego level. And the way to do that was to just go along with the game. And yet I was certainly not under obedience to her. I didn't have to do it. I didn't have to come to the phone just because she asked me. There was no reason at all. It would have been perfectly simple to say, who's she to bother me? I would have been within my normal human rights to answer so. But I felt that no, there's something more. God is imposing this on me in order to teach me a lesson. There was an experience like that St. Francis and his disciples had. They gave up everything. They had nothing but a little wooden shack that was open to the elements, and when it snowed, the snow would blow in to where they were living, and the rain would come down through the roof, and they really had nothing. They'd given up everything for God. And one night there was a big snowstorm, and they heard a lot of pounding outside, and a donkey appeared and thrust its way in, and a peasant was saying, What are these beggars doing here? Get out! I need this place for my nag. And all the monks were saying that this was the last straw. Absolutely not. They'd given up everything for God, but they certainly didn't have to give up this too. And St. Francis said, no. We've given up everything for God, now God wants it through this donkey. And Master said that was God's test. That they're being able to say, yes, all right, if it's to be, my ego comes secondary. Anything that you can do to discipline your ego is wholesome. Don't allow your delusion, which is all it is, to come in and say, wait a minute, but I've got to emphasize my free will. It isn't freedom if you're defending your ego. It's free if you're defending your soul. And one of the best ways to defend your soul is to give your ego a few kicks every now and then. Place it at a disadvantage. If other people are asking things of you that are unpleasing to your ego, or unpleasing to you, let's say, ask yourself, who is not pleased, my ego or my soul? If it's your soul, then virtue will be involved, truth will be involved. If they're asking you to come out and help you commit a crime, help them commit a crime, your soul will say no. But if they are asking you to do things for them, or if they are arguing or scolding or imposing or whatever it might be, even though it may not help them. Now, in this case of that woman calling me, I knew it wasn't helping her. It wasn't at all a clear-cut choice of, well, I'm giving up something. I'm giving up a warm meal, because when I came back it was always cold. But I'm giving up a warm meal, but it's important because I'm helping her. I knew I wasn't helping her at all. But I was helping me. I was helping me by squelching my ego's desire for a warm meal and not to be bothered. And as long as the ego was there complaining, I said, no, I'm going to answer that phone. And 45 minutes later, I had done no good to her, but I had done some good to me. And when I learnt that little lesson, perhaps that's when she stopped calling. She got called to India, thank heaven. But anything you can do to tromp on this ego, to let people take advantage of you to some extent, not to be a doormat. There's such a subtle, it's not an easy thing. If you let yourself be a doormat, your will becomes weakened. But if by your own willpower you make a deliberate choice to go that extra mile, just to show yourself that you're free, this is good. Anything that can get you away from ego commitment to things, to desires, to the fruits of action, anything that can help you to become centered in your spine, anything that can help you to become centered in that inner peace, anything that can help you to live for God and not ego, and offer it up to Him. I was offering those counseling sessions up to Him. I did it for Him. Anytime you do it that way, there's no loss of freedom, there's a gain of freedom. If you do it from a sense of suppression, that's not a gain of freedom. But the other, yes, sure. Do it for Him, live for Him, and live joyously for Him. And you will find that in that thought, you will become more and more free, more and more deep, and that deepness, that increasing receptivity, that increasing ability to listen for guidance. Listen to what's going on. Try to hear what's trying to happen in your life and in the universe. The more you will find a security that nothing will be able to shake you. The more you will know that you're in touch with something that makes everything worthwhile. The spiritual path is a wonderful path. It sounds to the worldly person as if it was a path of self-suppression and self-denial and all these things. It isn't that at all. When St. Francis went out into the cold with those monks, it was with joy, with a song on their lips, with a sense of victory, of accomplishment. An accomplishment they would have never had if they had huddled and clung to that little bit of protection and comfort that they had found in that little hut. One day St. Francis was walking along the road, and a blind and very poor woman, seeing him and not realizing, because she was so not completely blind but short-sighted, not realizing that he was even poorer than she. She asked him for alms, and he had nothing to give her. And then he remembered that he had a Bible. It was his only possession and very dear to him. And so he gave her that. I don't know if she could have read it, but perhaps somebody could read it to her. At any rate, it was all he had to give. And he said to God, I've given away your word. And God's answer in his soul was, I have planted my word in your heart. If you give up in his name, you will find that he has given everything back to you. Maybe on a soul level, maybe on an outward level, but everything will come to you if you give it up for him.